He came up to me at a stoplight. He looked at me and goes, "Do you know where you're going?"
Welcome to 10-Minute Travels. With me, as always, is Phil Freeman.
And with me, as always, is Shane Patrick. And we have with us Charles Fleming, adventurer, journalist, motorcyclist. And if you want to learn anything more about 10-Minute Travels or what we do, check out 10minutetravels.com.
Let's get right to it, shall we?
Hey, Charles.
Hello, everyone else.
Let me introduce to you Shane Patrick.
Hi, Charles.
Morning.
A little background. Shane and I met, 30 years ago now. Close, 27 years ago. And we were both rental agents at a ski rental shop at Alyeska Ski Resort. And
Now, Phil, do you think I don't know this? Do you think
you already,
Do you think I didn't do my due diligence and
of course,
listen to some of your podcasts and learn all about you guys? Come on.
You
okay.
didn't listen to all of them back to back to back to back like a psychopath?
Not like a psychopath, no, but I did listen to them all back to back. Yeah, just like a due diligence kind of psychopath, you know.
Oh, dang. Well, Charles already knows how we met and evolved, and he's now in Maine on an apple farm. And Charles and I met, over 10 years ago, I would think. And he came in the door as, hey, I can cover one of MotoQuest's rides as a journalist. I think that's how it worked. And we got you on a couple of them. And you and I actually shared some road time in Hokkaido. That's where we kind of hung out and started jazzing a little bit. And then we met in Mexico for that informal or formal industry meet where I got us lost into Tecate. And I showed you how to get lost.
You're so lost that you don't even remember where you got lost. It's terrible. It was in Ensenada.
Well, that was the first time. I'm talking about the second time I got lost that day. He came up to me at a stoplight. He looked at me and goes, "Do you know where you're going?" And the thing was, is that day I just took all my guide gear off mentally, and I was just going by myself back to LA. And all of a sudden I was with four people or so, and then my irresponsibility carried through pretty well through the day until they actually ended up showing me how to get back home. So that's how that day worked.
I'm a journalist. We ask questions like, do you know where you're going? We just seek information as journalists. That's all we do. We're just attempting to learn what we don't know so that we can help others who might also be lost.
So I was talking to Shane and I was like, we need to interview Charles because he's intriguing. And you got several really cool stories, but what I like is just how you got into journalism. How does one even do that? One day you just have an epiphany. Was it your background or your parents? How did you get into it?
Well, if that's a real question, I can start answering right now.
Yeah.
We're recording. This is happening.
I come by it naturally. I come by it genetically. My father was a journalist. My mother was a radio journalist before she married my father. My father was a journalist. He got his start in the American South, where he was born, where I was born, where my mother was born, North Carolina, and became something of a power in journalism because he was one of the first mainstream journalists to start covering the civil rights movement in its very, very nascent stages. One of the first people. He was then working for the Atlanta Constitution, but then later for Newsweek magazine. And he was usually the first guy, he or another guy were the first guys in town when there was a church bombing or a lynching or a bus having been overtaken and, people thrown off of it, that sort of thing. The violence that was so attendant to the very early civil rights movement. And he became a sort of a star in that world and a very inspiring example because of his courage and his bravery and his unwillingness to back down and his willingness to take the side of the little guy against the side of the big guy. In this case, the little guy being the black people who were oppressed in the South, and the big guys, the bad guys, being his own people, Southern white people.
Was there fear in your household?
Oh yeah, tremendous, because he would go away and often be gone for 3 or 4 days at a time. And of course, this was when the long distance calls were expensive and there wasn't any other sensible way to communicate. And so he would be gone for 3 or 4 days. And we knew from what was on the news that he was going into places where there was real danger. And, we didn't always know that he would come home. And we didn't know when he came home what things had happened to him. We didn't know when he had been beaten up, and we didn't know that he had been shot at and gun to his head and threatened and things like that, because he didn't share that with us. But we knew it was dangerous, and the danger culminated when he was by then we had moved to the West Coast. He was then the bureau chief in Los Angeles for Newsweek magazine, and he was covering the Watts riots, and he was jumped by a group of black kids and beaten badly enough to be hospitalized and badly enough to be in danger of losing his life for a while, and he survived. But yes, it was a very tumultuous time and a very difficult time and a very scary time, and a very inspiring time too. So although I did not want to follow in my father's footsteps, I had other plans for myself. It happened that when I was in Japan, we share that. I was in Japan working for a university and not having a very heavy workload, but there were many things about Japan that fascinated me. And so I thought, well, what's the best way to find out about things that fascinate you and maybe get paid doing it? So I started pitching magazines on things about Japan that fascinated me. I think the first thing that fascinated me that turned into a story was the sort of subculture of the bosozoku in Japan, the high revving motorcycle riding, car riding, strangely coiffed baby Yakuza that I know that you're familiar with. And I started magazine freelancing from Japan. And then when I came back to the US, I found that I had enjoyed that more than the other work that I'd been doing, which was primarily teaching.
Did you
So I,
study journalism formally?
not at all, not at all.
So organically, I mean, if anybody travels with you, they see that you have a pen and you have a pad and you are taking down notes and you never stop. You're a machine. And that's a habit that's formed over the years. You don't even think about it. You just start to put thoughts down. Now, did that happen at home? Do you see your parents doing that, walking around? I imagine just being in that culture. Uh,
And there were journalists around all the time, and so journalists in my home when I was a kid, journalists talk shop, and they tell stories, and they talk about conversations with editors, and they tell you stories about how stories got made and how they got remade and how they got written and how they got rewritten. And so I soaked up an awful lot of this stuff without really knowing. And then when it came time for me to start freelancing, I had a lot of information in my head about how that was done. I mean, I knew how you pitched a magazine, and I knew how you prepared a pitch, and I knew how you reported a story, because I had listened to my father and my mother and other journalists talk for years and years and years about hard stories that they had worked on and how they had cracked the nut on this or that. And I also had the benefit of youth and ignorance. So I didn't really know or care how dangerous the Bosozoku were or weren't, or how dangerous the Yakuza were or weren't. So I kind of went in a little stupid to some of those stories in ways that my Japanese friends later would gasp in horror and say, "Oh my God, you can't do that. You can't just go up and talk to guys about their tattoos. Like they'll kill you." But it turned out that they didn't kill me.
Now, you got back to the States after Japan, and then somehow you ended up becoming, full time with the Los Angeles Times. You wrote numerous articles for a variety of magazines all over the place, and then you started getting into books, and you put out quite a few. How did that come together?
Well, I started in books pretty early in my career. That had always been my game, uh, or my intended goal anyway. I only was working at newspapers and magazines because I knew I needed to do that before to establish myself before I could sit down to doing the bigger, larger pieces. And so I ended up in Los Angeles. I ended up covering the entertainment industry from the business standpoint because that happened to be the only job that was available the day that I went to visit the Herald Examiner, and they were trying to fill this position for a long time. And they said, well, obviously you don't know anything about Hollywood, but you're obviously a good writer and you seem to be a pretty good reporter, and maybe we can teach you the rest. So we'll give you a 3-month probation in that position. And it turned out I was a quick learner. I had some good teachers. So I succeeded in that. And that ended up kind of being my beat for the next few years. I worked there at the Herald Examiner. I worked at Variety, again, covering the movie studios, the TV networks, the record labels. And then I worked, as my father had done, I ended up at Newsweek. And after a while, I quit to go freelance and wrote a lot for Vanity Fair and some other big magazines, New York Times also, Los Angeles Times also as a freelancer. And then I had the opportunity to do a book, and I did a book that was successful. And then I just did books only for the next 20 years.
That was Charles Fleming, journalist, adventurer, walker. And if you want to learn anything else about 10-minute travels or whatever we do, check out 10minutretravels.com.
And we want to remind you to make sure your sense of humor matches your sense of adventure. And please like, subscribe, and share this podcast on all the platforms.